Okay, so let's talk about sleep. One of my very favorite things to do, but one of the things that I am admittedly worst at. So before we get into the content of this section of lecture, I just want to pose a couple questions to you. So first, did you get to bed before 11 p.m. last night? And so what researchers might consider a reasonable hour. And I ask this because recent evidence suggests that people are going to bed later and later. There's a number of factors that are likely leading to this. The increasing use of screens and the blue light on screens, as we'll see, shifts circadian rhythms and can make it harder to fall asleep and also to have high quality sleep. We're also working a lot more work is being taken home with email, and I'm sure as you're all experiencing with remote learning that work can spill over into all hours of the day and night, and particularly for those of you who are working in different time zones. So I don't ask you this question with judgment. I certainly didn't make this curfew and often don't, because we're all engaging in these things, but it's something important to think about as health psychologists, the ways in which our society and our cultural factors are impacting our sleep, because as we'll see, sleep is really critical to our health. Then you can think about, regardless of what time you got into bed, how much sleep did you get last night? And so think about how many hours that was. And as we'll see in this lecture, and I don't think I need to convince you of this, people are, again, not getting enough sleep. They're going to bed later, and they're still needing to get up quite early often, and so people are not getting enough sleep. Then the third question is, how many days per week did you wake up feeling rested? I laugh a little bit at this because I don't really remember the last time that I felt this way, but this is an important question, right? This is one way that we get at the quality of sleep that people are having, right? And so this is a subjective question, right? We're asking how you feel, but waking up feeling rested is an indicator of quality sleep. An interesting side note here, Dr. Metz found a study just the other day that indicated that people who have dogs and let the dog sleep in the bed report waking up feeling rested more days of the week than people who have a dog but do not let the dog sleep in the bed. And so this was actually against many hypotheses, but just an interesting side fact. Again, this is all with self-unreported correlational data, but just a little fun fact to show that researchers really do use questions like this to try to get at measures of sleep quality. And so we can compare, the amount of sleep that we're getting to the recommendations. And so for people over the age of 18, we should be getting 7 to 8 hours a day. And as we'll see, of course, there's individual differences in how much people sleep, but on average, adults need 7 to 8 hours a day. Babies and children and teens need more, right? So infants need quite a lot of sleep. I've been experiencing this recently. We have a new niece, and she sleeps, most of the day. Of course, she doesn't sleep as well as at night as my sister would like, but yes, babies sleep a lot. And as we'll see, this is in part because they're really developing their brains and their body, and sleep is a really important process for growth and learning. So yes, and so we definitely need more sleep than most of us are getting. As you see here, teens, so people 13 to 18 years need 8 to 10 hours a day, and most of them are not getting that either. This is just a funny meme, but this really does reflect a really important issue in our society, right? We know from science that teens need a lot of sleep, and yet we're starting school at an ungodly hour for many of them. And so this has actually had a student write a really interesting paper on this once about using science to argue for why we should start school later in high schools as well as middle schools, and how this would impact not just health but also learning. So again, we can see here the intersection, right, of the biopsychosocial model. These are the social factors that really do impact our biology and our psychology. Right? I can tell you all to get a lot of sleep, but if you don't have time for that and you need to log on for a live lecture at a certain time and you're in a different country, that's just not going to be possible, right? So you can see here that these social factors really do make a difference in sleep. So again, just to reiterate the point that people are not getting enough sleep, the numbers on exactly how much people are how much sleep people are getting in different countries varies a bit depending on which source you look at, but we see a similar trend across all these different sources of data. And so there's a converging evidence here to suggest that most people are not getting enough sleep, but some countries, people are getting more. And this probably has to do a lot with cultural factors around work. And so you can see with the Netherlands and New Zealand are getting the most sleep, so getting just around 8 hours, a few minutes more on average. In this chart, we see that Singapore and Japan are getting the least sleep, so significantly less than 8 hours. The number of minutes is higher, but we see the same rank order of sleeping in another study. This was done by a company that has created a sleep app, and so what these essentially do is they say they're measuring your sleep, but they're measuring how still you are laying during the night. And so what they find here is they looked at 48 different countries, or individuals in 48 different countries who all use this app, and in none of them were people getting a full 8 hours of sleep. What we see on this graph here is the countries in which people were getting the least sleep. So the 5 countries with the least sleep in this study were Japan and Saudi Arabia, Sweden, India, and the Philippines, and the ones getting the most sleep again were the New Zealand and the Netherlands and Finland and Great Britain and Ireland. So we don't see Canada here, but it's falling someplace in the middle here between 6.5 and 7.5 hours of sleep. And again, I labeled this as time in bed because they're not actually assessing sleep. They're measuring laying still, which often correlates with sleep, but you'll find that these apps often don't work very well if, for example, you have your dog in the bed with you. That might create movement. Gordy sleeps like a rock, so he's not really an issue. I've tried these out, but something to keep in mind if you're using an app to assess your sleep quality, right? The data is only as good as the measures that it's taking. And so measuring movement is a good proximal indicator of sleep, but it's not a one-to-one measure, right? So regardless, people are not getting enough sleep. That's really the point of these slides. So there's a lot of factors that impact sleep. First, there's a lot of genetic variation in how much sleep people need because of the efficiency of their sleep and how much they need overall. There seems to be a lot of difference that's sort of wired into us from birth. And so, some people really can get by with 6 hours of sleep and feel great. They feel rested. I have cousins like this. I don't really understand it. But for me, I definitely need 8 hours of sleep every night, if not more. And some people, for various reasons, may need 10 hours of sleep a night. And as we'll see, this is usually to do with differences in the amount of slow wave sleep that they're getting per sleep cycle. So we'll see how the sleep cycles are supposed to work, and when they're not working in the ideal way, then that can mean that you need more sleep in order to get the high quality sleep that actually leads you to feel rested. So certainly there are genetic differences in how much sleep that you need. So it's important to think about both these recommendations on average, but also how much sleep do you need, right? If you are feeling fine with 6 or 7 hours a night and you feel great and energized, then maybe that's okay. And if you're feeling like you're getting 8 hours a night and you're still exhausted, maybe you do need more, and that's something worth prioritizing. I know that's easier said than done, but it's something worth thinking about. All right, so other factors that impact sleep are circadian rhythms. This is what controls sleep. And I'm not going to really go into the details of that, but there's some really important things that affect our circadian rhythms, which should be a rhythm, right? They should be cycling with the sun going up and coming down, right? That we should be having a regular sleep-wake cycle. But we are exposed to all kinds of artificial light these days, and that can affect our circadian rhythms, right? If we have lots of light around us at night, it's basically tricking our body into thinking that the sun is still up, and so it's not time to be getting ready for bed yet. And particularly blue light, which is emitted from a lot of screens, has a particular impact on the circadian rhythms because that's sort of spiking that the most. It's making the body think that it's daytime, and so this is why a lot of devices now, and there's apps for the night shift, right, that tries to filter out a lot of that blue light. And this does help, but there's still effects of using screens at night, right? It's not just that they have light, they're also cognitively stimulating, and even the redder light still has an impact. So certainly if you need to be using a screen at night, a Redshift app is better than nothing, but if it's possible to engage in better sleep hygiene, as we call it, it's better not to be using apps and phones in the hours before you want to go to bed. Again, do as I say, not as I do. I certainly check my email into the late hours, and I know that this is bad for sleep, and yet, this is the context that we live in, and so sometimes we need to know these things and try to make adjustments, but again, I know it's easier said than done. Other things that impact our circadian rhythms are alcohol and our caffeine consumption. Caffeine literally stimulates our sympathetic nervous system, right? That it creates a stress response, right? It's not by accident that if you have too much, you feel your heart palpitating and you start to sweat. This is your sympathetic nervous system activating via the release of more adrenaline. And so this is why caffeine is something that works really well when you want that, but it can have a lasting impact and can impact your sleep for a long time after you may think. And so caffeine can have an impact on your sleep for up to 12 hours after you have your last caffeinated beverage. Alcohol also impacts sleep. You may feel like having a drink or two helps you to fall asleep, and that may be true, but there is particularly strong evidence that having more drinks than that can disrupt the quality of your sleep. You may have had the experience after a night of drinking that you wake up really early when you do not want to be awake. You want to be able to keep on sleeping, but this is because alcohol, again, disrupts your ability to reach that slow wave, restful sleep, and so it actually is not good for your sleep overall. So I would not recommend that as a long-term sleep aid. Having a regular sleep schedule is really the best thing you can do in terms of your sleep hygiene or trying to create a good sort of sleeping cycle. And so, this is, again, something that's easier said than done, but trying not to stay up really late on some nights and get up early on others, or sleep in, right? So you're trying to, sorry, I'm not explaining that well. What you want to be doing is you want to be going to bed and getting up at around the same time every night and day. And so this helps your circadian rhythms to stay in a rhythm and to stay regular. And this is going to make a little bit more sense when we look at the cortisol patterns in the next section. So as we'll see, cortisol is a really key hormone, not just in stress, but in regulating sleep. And when we keep a regular sleep schedule, this helps to keep our cortisol cycle regular, and then therefore impacts our ability to sleep and also our stress. Other key factors are exercise. We're going to talk more about this at the last section of this lecture. And then all of these things are important because they can impact both your sleep amount, right, the quantity of your sleep, but they can also affect your sleep quality or the efficiency of your sleep, right? So we mentioned that with alcohol, right, that it really affects the quality of your sleep as well as the quantity. You don't get that restful sleep, and also you don't stay asleep as long usually.